Buenos dias! This is the Critical Hit Podcast, episode 3.
I guess it's still the morning.
Well, you know, we ate breakfast about an hour ago, so...
I wonder, how do you guys typically listen to this? Is this something you guys do while you're working?
Or you...
You guys mentioned how if we could do this, like, upload it to SoundCloud and stuff, which is definitely a possibility, make it MP3. I don't know what RSS is. I'll have to figure that out.
Working on it. Anyway, how was your week?
My week was good. Getting stuff done. I actually didn't do a lot of snip stuff this week. I focused on personal work because of... I don't want to get into it. Snip stuff. A lot of conversations going on right now. Mm-hmm. But
reworking some story elements.
Not reworking. Dealing with what we got at this point. We're kind of late in the game to make any big story changes.
Because stories are important. Anyway, this week in the world of John, it was a fun week. I was on a photo shoot for 3 days with a product, and it was a great time. It was a really cool experience for me because I'm kind of a junior member of the team, and getting to be a part of a big photo shoot that had wardrobe and hair and makeup and craft services, all that stuff. Like, it was a lot of fun to be on that. Mm-hmm. But one thing that kind of did dampen the experience was one of the guys who was on the shoot was just kind of grouchy. Like, always had to have an opinion about something and wasn't a lot of fun to be around.
Was he a green monster who lived in a can?
He was not. He was a tallish leprechaun looking dude.
Oh,
anyway,
gosh. I don't know if that's PC.
Not super awesome, but, we all got past it. I think what was interesting was after the first day, we were like, oh, brother, this is going to happen for 2 more days. And it did. And nothing changed. He wasn't just having a rough day. He was having a rough life. But we always talk about how when you're working with people on different things, be it movies or stories or anything that you have to collaborate with people on, it's just like a good idea to just try to be cool about it and not be a jerk and not always have to have the last say.
Yes, we talk about that a lot in animation. If you listen to any professionals talking about how to get into the industry, it's always do good work and don't be a jerk.
And that is probably the best way to say that. Yeah. Just be a cool guy and do the best that you can.
Yep.
Or gal. So on to the first question.
Well, we haven't even told them what we're doing. This podcast is going to be catch up. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to because they came in after we asked it. I guess I should ask questions like a day before I do a podcast instead of the morning of.
Yeah.
But so we're going to focus mostly on those today.
We're working on this. We're kind of new to podcast stuff.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We just like hanging out and talking to you guys.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of reading all the comments that you guys put out. It just feels more like a conversation to me.
Yes.
I'm into that.
So we will climb in length of answer, I suppose. So we'll start short. First one from Nata. Nata asks, Adam was interested in animation specifically, so I was wondering if you might have a blog or not. I would love to look at your work. Thank you. I do not have an art blog. I am into animation and art and all that stuff. Even this week, I said personal work. Some of that was painting. Some of that was doing animation for my reel. But I don't have enough work to justify a blog at this point, so I do not have one. But I have thought about it and considering it for the future until I get at least some sort of consistent workflow to make it worthwhile to have one.
I should mention, Adam is always trying to make something. It's like his talents and interests are varied, and so I think some of that would be kind of hard to put on a blog sometimes. I guess you could put pictures of some of the stuff that you make, like if you're painting or something like that. Because you don't always do digital paintings. Sometimes you do tangible paintings.
I have not done practical painting in a long time. I'd like to get into it because I experimented with acrylics that one time and hated the experience. So I want to try oils.
Yeah. But also I can say that over the last couple of years, it's been kind of cool to see that he's gotten a little bit better. And so definitely a decent artist. Next.
Appreciate that. Next, do we want to jump to Nata's third question or hop over to somebody else and come back to it?
Let's go ahead. And okay. I think before we go on to this, I am very much wondering if that is short for Natalia.
Oh.
But also, I think it's super cool that you are listening to this podcast in Russia.
In Russia, yeah.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Anyway.
I'll let you read this.
brings up a good point about Toy Story 3. She mentions that Chuckles and Big Baby both have scenes in Toy Story 3 where they look at the moon, and that is kind of symbolic of them reminiscing on the time when they were playing with their owner, and they have all these fond memories. And Lotso Hugs is also a part of their gang. Some would say he's the leader of the ensemble. I'm the leader of this ensemble. And but he doesn't have those same like memories, and he's hardened, and how that small thing really does influence how we view that character, and we're able to tell what headspace he's in.
Right. It's sort of that whole visual storytelling thing, like showing their emotions through the visuals of the scene and the emotions, how they react to things. But what was interesting about the comment and made me feel a little uncomfortable was how Neta mentions that she noticed the scene because of considerations that came, I guess, from listening to Critical Hit and having inspired her to think more in depth about films.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we get stuff like that all the time, and I'm always like, I don't know if, like, I don't know. Just my credentials, like, these are just things we talk about and ideas we come up by ourselves sometimes. And it's like we got on Tumblr, what is that famous I regret? Is that what that says?
I'm not entirely sure.
It's kind of far away.
Yeah.
No, it's like Rascot.
Faru Iraska?
Okay.
Anyway.
Sorry, your name's far away. We appreciate it, but they talk about how they showed our character development to one of their teachers, and then that teacher showed it in class, and it's like, academia supports your analysis skills, which makes me feel very uncomfortable. I am in no way should be a part of a teaching role.
At the same time, though, I mean, both of us have been involved with a whole bunch of different things that kind of lend themselves to us gaining some information about this kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I was in film school, you were at Animation Mentor, and we both have read stuff and continue to listen to podcasts and read blogs about that kind of stuff all the time.
And so
know this, although we are sometimes uncomfortable with you guys with your appreciation for what we do, it is grounded in some stuff that we've just taken from a lot of pros, and we just repeat a lot of stuff. They say the best artists are thieves, and
true.
I think that we thieve pretty hard.
We do. We do.
But more questions.
More questions. So let's jump down from that column now to Put Me in a Book, which is also a personal message on the Tumblr. Yeah.
It says, what do you think of the use of lighting in films to convey mood? Is it overused, forced? And then she mentions a specific scene in Tangled right after Rapunzel and Flynn leave the tower. She sees Maximus, and she's like, where's your rider? And she comes back to the tower.
I wish they didn't use Ryder, like I understand it, but Flynn Rider, so I always think of that.
It gets kind of weird because with name, and he's actually rode that horse, but he wasn't actually riding.
Where's your Flynn Rider?
Where's your Flynn Rider?
Anyways,
but
keep going.
she goes back to the tower, and all of a sudden, the whole scene gets very dark, like physically dark. And,
and
I don't mean
cool
like tonally,
shot
but also
it's looking down, it's dark, and there's like the window light coming in.
The beam of light. Yeah, and she's like, no!
She gets all Darth Vader on
her. And the thing that's really funny is Adam and I have been watching Tangled a lot lately. I'm not saying we're doing anything with it, but we might be.
Wow.
But
I'm just gonna drop that.
But that scene was one that actually I felt that exact same way. Like I was like, wait a second, this is like maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Rapunzel and Flynn are about to go to the Snuggly Duckling, and it's all happening the same day as they leave. And I'm like, why all of a sudden did the weather just change? Because Mother Gothel has now realized that Rapunzel's not in the tower. I mean, she's not any kind of like sorceress or anything like that. She's pretty much, for all accounts, just a regular old woman who's found the secret, the Fountain of Youth, or the Hair Fountain of Youth. But she couldn't like conjure the clouds to, get dark all of a sudden. And that's a thing that bothered me. And, it was a small point, and it took me out of the story for just a moment. But for Adam, that wasn't a thing at all.
Yeah, that's definitely not a thing. It's something I'm very conscious about, especially being friends with you, and then some of my friends who work on Snip with me. Like, when we have these conversations about story and what we value, I'm definitely one who values physics and continuity less than, I guess, either visual kind of design aspects or just straight storytelling things or mood things. Like, that's a big thing, and I think this is what this kind of goes into, is lighting conveying mood. And for me, when you come away from a film, you're going to feel the mood and the tone longer than you're going to remember that. Unless it really trips you up, then I can see that. I think that's a lot of people's argument about Tangled, is that, you know, she just doesn't act like she should if she was locked away that whole time, and they get tripped up on that, and then they can't enjoy the rest of it, which is unfortunate.
Right. That was something that I really thought was, you know, interesting. Like, would we... They're all like, assuming that Rapunzel would have Stockholm Syndrome to a level that she was pretty emotionally damaged, and that she should act crazier than she does in the film. But real quick, one question that I would have about that is just like, would she be as likable of a character if she were more mentally stable?
I don't want to give away too much before anything just random might
something,
show up.
That's just something to chew on.
There is a character there. Like, there are very specific choices they made, so she doesn't seem cray.
Right. And we will get back to that later, maybe.
But, so, considering the question, like, I do value tone and emotions and mood more than continuity. I told you the story about early on in snip development. There was a cut we had that we were shooting into a mirror on, like, into a mirror of our characters, and I wanted to actually break the physics and have the composition be clear about, like, the visual language we'd set up, him on the left, her on the right, so just immediately clear. But then I got opposition from someone else in the group who's like, but that's not how a mirror works. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, visual things. And they're like, yeah, but physics. And it's definitely something to consider, because we know the last thing you want to do is trip someone up so they can't enjoy the rest of it. But hopefully, and as we ended up doing, you find a solution that encompasses everybody.
Yeah,
right.
That's the ideal of ideals. And I will mention, Adam does not tend to care about physics that much, because when we play Smash, I'm like, how does that happen? And he's like, oh, physics just aren't a part of the game. You're just talking about physics. That doesn't work right now.
Man, I'm not going to go into it, but last tournament, I need to show you a crazy thing that happened. Okay. Anyways.
So,
next thing.
Shyless Norlax said, how much do you think stories should
we're going in.
tell solely through symbolism? I've seen plenty of stories that rely heavily on symbolism to deliver the message of the story, but I think that sometimes it gets too exaggerated.
This is something I have thought about significantly,
and this is something that I thought about a good amount too, because as a creative, you tend to want to imbibe whatever you're writing with the messages or the things that you really hold dear.
And so in animation, clarity is like of utmost importance. We talk about silhouette, we talk about simplifying action, so a point is clear. So symbolism goes into that, because symbolism is inherently not clear, right? Like, not immediately clear. Like, that's kind of the fun of it, is that, like, say, like, in Frozen, to allude to our next question, they have the whole symbolism of the door being shut. I think that's a really cool symbol, and I think it's clear, and I think that's a good use of it. But, I mean, me and Jeb were talking about this the other day, and I think it depends. We have to define terms here. Like, are we talking about the whole story as a greater metaphor for either social issue or whatever, or are we talking about those small symbols that just enhance the storytelling, like that door, for instance?
I think that we're probably talking about a whole multitude of different symbols that are being used in a story to convey different things.
So, like, like the door, or this is not a story I recommend watching, but there's a movie called You and Me and Everybody Else, where I think this is the too far of that. Because, so I was talking about clarity and, like, using... It has to be clear to me. For me personally, like, first time through, it has to be possible that I can understand the story through these symbols, if that's going to be your way to go. If it's just vague and supposed to be artsy, I don't think that's... Like, why would I watch it again to figure out what it means?
We actually had a really long conversation about this. Like, it kind of goes into what I was saying earlier. The audience doesn't owe you anything.
Right.
They're watching the thing because maybe they want to, but they don't necessarily owe you several more hours of their life to consider what you meant when you were saying what you said.
Yeah.
That also being said, art is a thing that you can do as self-expression. And it's something that you might find meaning in that somebody else might not find it. So is it worth it to you to just have your expression be out there, or do you want to relate to somebody? Do you want to to have a conversation with somebody? What are you trying to say? And so symbolism for a general audience, I would say, err on the side of making it as clear as you can. But, you can also infer that your audience is decently intelligent a lot of the time. And you can say what you want to say. I would just say, don't overcomplicate things.
Yeah. And I would, there is enjoyment. I would not get rid of the symbolism, because there is, for instance, the door thing. I enjoy that aspect about Frozen. And I like engaging with things that people do as symbolism.
I think we talked about this the other day, everybody kind of likes to have the aha moment. Oh, that's
right.
what they meant.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're not making that available to people, if that aha moment is just out of reach for your audience, then they're not going to get that and they're not going to connect.
And they have to be interested in it the first time through. I think Jeb mentioned, with the movie The Fall, that movie is easy to follow the first time through, but there are symbols you can engage with in later, but it's still an enjoyable time the first time through. So I'd be willing to watch that again. Whereas if your story's solely dependent on these symbols, I think you've gone too far.
Yeah. That Adam wanted us to watch The Fall a while ago, and he'd been telling me about this film for quite some time.
Actually recommended to me by one of you guys. Thank you.
Who? Oh, by one of the people on Critical Hit? That's awesome. Yeah, eventually we did watch it, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that visually it was a really cool movie. I thought they did the cinematography in it was beautiful. So it was a really fun thing to watch. But I would also say that that film has so much symbolism in it. And it's it's saying things, and eventually you can get there kind of when it all wraps up at the end. But it might be a little bit heady for some people.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But it's at least enjoyable and clear the first time through.
And there's another thing, this is kind of cool that The Fall does, is it has a story within a story that's fun to watch, regardless of if you get the symbolism of what's being said in the greater context of the film.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's worth a watch.
Definitely.
So
and I think a good transition then is now over back to Natah's question about Frozen.
So it looks like Natah really agreed with a lot of the things that you guys talked about in the Frozen Critical Hit, but she has a question as to how Frozen became such a big movie and why it had so much success. And she says generally when she asks people about the film, they tend to kind of go to the old faithfuls, the old reliables. Let It Go was such a great song, and
that scene was amazing.
The whole scene was amazing. Right. And then she has the question, can one song really help a majorly flawed work become excellent or become so widely regarded as something that's great?
This is a passionate topic for me, as you may or may not know. I've given a lot of thought to that specific idea, and I think actually, so referring to Let It Go and stuff, I think that's kind of a lot of people, when you ask them why they like or don't like a movie, they go to the, I don't want to say superficial, but kind of the things that they superficially enjoyed, but not the weight or the meat underneath it. And so, yeah, Let It Go is a good song. That scene's very, I don't know, cinematic and graceful, and it's enjoyable. It's actually my least favorite scene because of how we know Elsa, and we don't need to get into it, but she's not a main character, and it's a weird scene to focus on. But I think, personally, the reason why Frozen achieved such success is because, generally, the general audience doesn't experience the theme of a movie that often. Most people, when they see a movie, they're not going to go home and lay in thought about that movie and discuss what it means or what it was trying to symbolize. They're not going to stew in it.
Yeah.
But Frozen really pushed the theme hard, which was my greatest complaint about it, but it made it very obvious what the theme was to the general audience, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that. And then on top of that, the theme was also very relevant to
the times,
and it's very it's a good theme. I like the theme.
It was a theme.
So I think that's the meat of why people come. It's like, wow, I get it. I get what this movie's about, and I like what it's about.
Yeah.
And then also the music is very contemporary and
yeah,
fun.
and I think that that's something that you should also focus on. Like, the feel of that film is not... We talk about how the music doesn't really... In one of our critical hits, we talked about how the music isn't really indicative of that world so much as it is very contemporary, and it feels very modern.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of the language in the film feels very similarly to that too, and they're just very much... I would say that constitutes a lot of why it was so successful, is just because the characters themselves speak like us.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, but there was some other things. Like, obviously the theme is really obvious and in your face, and people like the aha moment, like we were just kind of talking about with the fall.
Exactly.
But the aha moment wasn't really that aha. It was just like...
There it is. We got to it finally.
It's like if you order a pepperoni pizza and you get it and you're like, and there's pepperonis on it. Hey! I'm
like
so hyped for this pepperoni
you ordered
pizza.
it with pepperoni, and you're super excited that there's pepperoni.
You're just like, this is exactly what I wanted, and this is how they delivered it. And then another thing that we talked about earlier was just how much was Frozen banking on the success of it being a Disney film.
Yes, that's a good, to transition to. Because the Bancroft brothers talk about this. They talk about it, how they think it's similar to how The Lion King had very bloated success based on the shoulders of Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. And that was why it kind of peaked where it did. And that they talk about that in Frozen too. Like, Frozen by itself would not be successful without Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph building up to it. An interesting point that you said earlier, if Frozen, the exact same quality, exact same movie, came out but had DreamWorks
Or Blue
in
Sky.
front of it, would it be as successful?
And that... I don't know that it would be. I don't think
it would.
I think people experience films in a couple different ways, and I would also say that one of the things that we talk about a lot is it something that you're immediately aware of? One of the things that we talk about is just like, would the general audience get it? We always say people would not like something, or they would like something, but they wouldn't know why.
Yeah.
And I would say a lot of people, their go-to answers for why they like Frozen is like, oh, Let It Go is so great.
Right.
That probably isn't why they liked that movie. What we said before is probably why they liked the movie, because they got the theme, and they were just like, oh yeah, how fun. This resonates really well with the cultural construct that it exists inside of. Oh, look, girl power. And all that.
Okay.
And that's not wrong. Like, all those things are good. Like you said, we like the theme.
Yeah.
But we just don't like how it was manifest in the movie itself.
And then going back to the idea of them being from a different company, like, does that matter? Like, a lot of people really liked, or a lot of people when they talk about the success of Frozen, talk about it in the context of the Disney tradition, the fairy tales and all that. But that's an issue I have too. Like, should I go into this movie with, Disney in mind, like
the pretense,
their discography, or their resume,
their filmography. Yeah. So what we're saying here is just like, why can't a movie stand alone? I think that it's great that Disney's established the reputation that they have for being solid storytellers. But I think with each individual film that you view, you have to view it in its own lens, under its own context, and you kind of have to take it from the Disney box that you want to put it in and view it as a story in and of itself.
Right, that, like, individual artists who, they work for Disney, but they're not, like, affiliated with it. Like, a lot of these writers have probably worked at DreamWorks. They've probably worked freelance. Like, these are individual artists who write, and so we need to view their story as a bunch of, an amalgamation of many artists, more so than the Disney label.
And I think that what Disney has done is what a lot of people want to do. They want to be able to sell movies based off of their name. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that there's anything inherently wrong with having a standard by which to judge the quality of your things, of your creation by. But at the same time, if you're an artist, or if you're working on something yourself, you have to realize that there's a whole bunch of individual people who are going into work, putting themselves into that film. Yeah. They're not going there every day to make a Disney film necessarily. A lot of times they're going in there to make the film that they're passionate about.
Even though that probably is a conversation a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Does this feel like a Disney film?
Yeah.
Because each studio has their style. I don't know. It's interesting, but I agree with what we're saying. I agree with ourselves.
I agree with us too.
I never go into a movie with the context of anything else. Like, if Pixar did a meta critique of their own films through a film, I would probably not enjoy it that much, because I wouldn't go into it, with The Incredibles and Finding Nemo in mind. I would just go into it as, oh, sweet, a movie, and I like the stuff Pixar has done previously as a brand.
I think we've done ourselves a disservice by saying any and all things Disney/Pixar I'm a fan of. I think we've done ourselves a huge disservice.
That's a good point.
And
Interesting.
Media literacy would say that we owe it to ourselves and the creators to view things objectively.
Independent.
Independent of the studio that they come from.
That's an interesting point. Because, once you claim yourself as a Disney fan, then you're liking everything of past, present, and future. But the future, they might not make a so good film. They've made not so good films.
Yeah. So watch out. Be careful.
When you're going across the street, look both ways.
Look both ways before you decide to just attach yourself with a studio, okay? It's a dangerous world out there.
We've talked at length on that, but Frozen is a hot topic. It's the reason Critical Hit is a thing, because we did not like... Well, it's not that... Well, we didn't like it, but we were just dumbfounded by the incredible success of it. As we've said many a time. So to finish up...
Oh, this is a thing... We'll get back to some of that other stuff later, but this is a thing. It seems like a lot of people do want to see a Critical Hit about sequels in general.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that Adam and I have been considering doing for quite some time. And I think that we're going to put a lot of time and effort into that one. Not that we don't put a lot of time and effort into all Critical Hits, but that's one that I really want to do some serious research on to understand just like how sequels come to be, why they seem to fall a little bit flat, how they continue to make money. I just want to know. I want to know all that stuff.
I actually blame everything on Pixar. More on that later. But if you look at Toy Story 2, it started a lot of trends that have kind of exaggerated themselves nowadays.
When you see a money-making formula, use that thing.
Like, a lot. Like, okay, small point that we could just talk about, me and Jeb have talked about, like, and I've been frustrated this past, but the generic 2, it's so dumb. And so I think
what do you mean by generic 2? Just putting 2 at the end of the name?
2.
Okay.
Like, in books, or Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter, it's Prisoner of Azkaban. It's, there's subtitles to the bigger brand, which give, art and meaning into the story.
Okay.
Instead of just...
It's a kind of a new story, not that 2.
Yeah, here's a title that is connected to a brand, 2nd edition.
Yeah, let's talk about how 2 could also mean TOO as well. It's like saying this film also, plus some, just plus extra.
This is the point that Jeb made, was like, in a lot of films it doesn't even work. So Toy Story 2 works because the second movie is also a story about toys. Whereas
Willie, it's a story about toys.
Yeah. But like, what was an example he used? Like How to Train Your Dragon 2. We're not training dragons in the second one. Madagascar, he mentioned that. The other movies, they're not in Madagascar anymore.
Yeah, I mean, technically, How to Train Your Dragon 2 should have been How to Slave Your Dragons.
I think that would have sold as well.
I can see why that didn't work. And I can see why they might have just gone for the How to Train Your Dragon 2.
Right. But it's interesting just on that point, because like, Pixar actually only uses 2 when it still applies. Cars 2, the second movie is still about cars. But Monsters, Inc. isn't Monsters, Inc. 2. It's Monsters University, because Monsters, Inc. doesn't apply to the second movie.
Well, it's a prequel as well.
Right. Yeah. But, I don't know, it's interesting. And like Finding Dory. It's not Finding Nemo 2, it's Finding Dory.
He's already been
found. The story has changed. So Pixar is privy to the naming, but DreamWorks is just following the Toy Story 2 beginning trendsetter and just continually putting 2s on. Like Shrek, all those work because it's still about Shrek.
Yeah,
but Madagascar does not work. Anyways, so thanks for listening. If you guys, do we have any specific questions for the people?
Just keep your eyes on the tumbles and we'll get back to you on some of the comments on YouTube.
Yeah, we always like listening to your comments. If you have anything to say about lighting and mood
or
Frozen
symbolism. You guys want to go into that a little bit more? I'd love to read more on that. That was a really cool
start
comment.
A conversation on that. Love conversating.
Yup. See you later.
Tell good stories.